Okay, so the first study or case study that we will talk about is related to this very interesting article that came up in the ProPublica newspaper and was written by a bunch of journalists who typically write science columns. Okay, these are journalists who write science columns, and they made this column on uh, the kind of unfairness in criminal justice systems that exist. And this study was conducted around May 2016. The news journal was ProPublica. You are able to see and listen to me, right?
Yes, sir.
Please confirm. Yeah, okay. So the journal name was ProPublica, and the study was conducted by three journalists: Jeff Larson, Surya Matto, Lauren Kircher, sorry, four journalists, and Yulia Angwin. So now what was this study about? This study was about a software named Compass that is used widely in criminal justice systems. Now, let me tell you a little bit of the background before we go into the details and the nitty-gritty of the study. So, in the US, actually, there has been a huge penetration of different decision-making algorithms in the criminal justice system. So, what do you mean by a criminal justice system? Any idea? Anybody? What is it? So it deals with the judiciary, that you understand, right? And it deals with like ascertaining whether somebody should be associated with some sort of criminality or not. Okay, and these kind of automatic criminal justice systems are deployed in order to help the uh, people involved in the judiciary, which includes the police, the lawyers, the judges, to make decisions about certain defendants. Okay, so defendants are people who offend and reoffend. Okay, and are like have typically have criminal cases, one or more criminal cases against them, filed against them. So these are people whom we will generally call or refer to by the name defendant. Okay, and this kind of criminal justice systems are used during the trials of these kind of offenders. Okay, so these defendants actually undergo trials where such criminal justice softwares are used by police, lawyer, and judges. Now, what do you think? I mean, just think from first principles. What do you think should these people use these kind of softwares for? What is the motive behind this kind of? I mean, behind using this kind of softwares? What do you think could be like one of the objectives?
So bringing objectivity into the procedure. Uh,
I mean, what procedure? What is the question at hand?
whether the alleged crime is like the alleged person has actually committed the crime or no.
Whether the alleged person has committed, but that there will be circumstantial evidences, etc. So, uh, like if you think from an AI or a machine learning perspective, what advantages do you think that this kind of system can bring? Think from that angle.
Predicting a crime or risk of reoffending.
Predicting, yes, predicting. So, very good. So, predicting is the point, is the main point. Now, predicting what? Predicting, typically predicting whether a defendant is going to re-offend in the near future. Okay, this is what you want to predict or ascertain. Now, this word in the criminal justice system or in the judiciary has a terminology which we will be using, and you will be coming across this term in multiple places. In fact, maybe some of you will be doing your term projects around these data sets. So this reoffending in the judiciary terms is called recidivism. And what these softwares do, softwares like Compass, they try to predict the risk of recidivism of a defendant in the near future. Okay, so now when this objective is settled, once we know that what these softwares are usually tasked to do, can you now think of like whether this could have any evil consequence, any inadvertent consequence?
Targeting a specific group, like probably a particular race or a,
What
but
does targeting mean? What does targeting mean?
like you would normally expect like each group to be equally likely to commit a crime, but if the system is biased towards one particular group more often.
Okay, very good. But how do you think that the system could get biased in the first place?
The data set itself might not have enough representation of
Very good. Very good. So you have actually set up the whole story for me. You have made the whole flow of this work that I'm going to present to you now very nicely and very succinctly in these few words. So in this particular article, as I said, the authors investigate Compass, which is a risk predicting software, which was released by a company called North Point. Okay. This is a very famous company releasing this kind of softwares, and Compass is actually like used widespread across the US in different counties. And in fact, it has become popular in different other demographics also. So now it is transcending the US boundaries. So, as you rightly pointed out, that there might be some issues with the dataset on which Compass has been built. There might be some biases towards certain specific groups. And this is exactly what the authors tried to study in this whole um work. Now, in order to do such study, the first thing that you probably require is a suitable data set on which the Compass software could be tested. Okay, so you need a suitable data set for this. Now, the authors chose Broward County of Florida. Now, there was a specific reason for choosing this county because it was easy to get the judiciary data for this county, since Florida has a policy of like very open judicial system. So therefore, it was easy for the authors to get the data set from this county. So because as we will see that there will be multiple types of data that they will need in order to establish their point. Okay. So now the study was conducted in two different segments. Okay. By the way, is my handwriting legible? Are you able to follow?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So uh, now they broke up the study into two parts, as I was saying. So in one part, they tried to build profiles of defendants and then test the software. Wherever I am referring to software, it means I'm talking about Compass. And then test the software against the different attributes on which the defendant profile was built. Now, the defendant profile was built on different attributes like age, race, criminal, past criminal record, gender, etc. The other part was compare the predictions from compass with the real occurrence of a crime, with, let's say, with the risk of the real occurrence of a crime in the near future. In terms of machine learning, compare compass predictions with ground truth data. Okay, so these are the two different things around which the authors conducted their study. Now, the Compass software actually gives you different types of scores, as well as each of these, or different categories of scores, I would say, and each of these categories are further divided into different graduations, which is like a Likert-like scale. Okay, so ProPublica went on to collect the Compass scores. So now the dataset collection. So as you will see in your term projects also, this dataset collection and cleaning procedure, dataset collection, cleaning, normalization procedure is a very important part. You will start getting meaningful results only when you have done this very thoroughly. Okay, so you have to be very, very thorough, especially when you are doing this bias fairness kind of experiments. So you have to be very careful that whatever sample that you are choosing is itself not biased. Okay, so all these things need to be very, very cautiously taken care of. So this is something that which I hope you will learn when you are doing term projects in this course. So collecting your data and sampling your data properly in order to show some bias or discrimination in some sort of an algorithm, or some bias present in the data set itself, you need to be very, very careful about the choice and the sampling of the data set in the first place. Okay, this is something that we will see time and again all through our course. Okay, so they got compass scores for around 2 years, which was released by the Broward County's Sheriff's Office. I will refer to this as all through. Okay, so this they obtained for 18,610 defendants. Now from this, they actually filtered out only those cases where there was a trial of the defendant. In many cases, the um, uh, issue did not even reach up to the trial stage. It could be like at the parole or at the probation stage. Okay, so those things were discarded. So, and only issues those reached the only those issues that reached the trial stage were considered, and this resulted in further reduction of the data to 11,757 defendants. Okay. Now this data set was, as I said, the 2-year time window was 2013 and 2014. Now, further, as I said, that the Compass software actually gives you scores in 3 categories. The first category is risk of recidivism. The second category is risk of violent recidivism. And the third category is risk of failure to appear before the court. Now, each of these scores have a graduation from 1 to 10. So it's a Likert-like scale. And according to the North Point's manual guideline, they have stated that if the compass score is between 1 to 4, then this is low risk. 5 to 7 is medium risk. and 8 to 10 is high risk. So now you see, you can have various combinations, right? So you have recidivism, low, medium, high. You can have violent recidivism, low, medium, high, and similarly, failure to appear, low, medium, high. Now, as you well understand that among these three, these two are important. Okay, more important. Failure to appear is, like, I would say, not as important as the risk of recidivism or the risk of violent recidivism. Okay, so the authors actually in their study considered only these two subcases. Okay, they did not go for studying this one, assuming that this is a much lower priority stuff than the other two. Now, as I said, so this is all about the compass score that they got for the defendants. Now, as I said, for each of these defendant, they will have to build a profile. Now, how do you go about doing this? Again, a set of tasks that they had to do in order to get this data. So for this, they had to collect what is called the criminal record. And how did they collect this? They filed a request. This is like an RTI in India. They filed a request to the Broward County's clerk's office. In order to get the criminal record for the defendants. Now, on one side, you have criminal records. On the other side, you have the compass scores. This was obtained from the Broward County's clerk's office, and this was obtained from the Broward County's sheriff's office. Okay. Now, the authors collected around 80K criminal records. Okay. Now, what is the next task? Can you think of, like, what should be the next logical step?
Table join, sort of. Like,
Table join. How will you do it? I mean,
uh,
what is the key?
mm,
What is the question that we have to ask now? Remember, these two are independent data sets that they have collected.
like some identifier of the particular defendant.
Very good. So basically, this is a defendant matching, right? So we have to match the criminal record of the defendant with the compass score, or let's say the compass data. So in order to execute this match, the authors resorted to three fields, as you are suggesting, three identifiers: first name, last name, and date of birth. Using these three attributes, they did a mapping. Okay, of course, this mapping would be not like, fully perfect. And they saw that there was a small error rate of 3.5%, sorry, 3.75%. Which is not so large, I would say. Now, this data set actually contain, this criminal record data set actually contain all the different attributes that we want, like race, gender, etc. Now, for race, again, they have some specific graduations like black, white. This is already marked in the criminal record. White, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, and others. So these were the races. And of course, without like going into all the different graduations of gender, they have just considered the binary form, male and female. Okay. So the profile is ready and the campus score is ready. What is left? So the materials for the first study is all there. What is left? What was the second study? Let me take you back there.
The comparison part, you have to compare with the.
So what you have to collect? What is left to collect? You have built the profile, you have got the compass score. What is left to collect?
Sir, what is the crime?
Ground truth.
The ground truth. Okay. Now, how did you get hold of the ground truth? So the authors used jail records. Again, this was obtained from the Broward County's sheriff's office, and they collected jail records from January 2013 all through April 2016. Okay. So these jail records have data about public incarceration. You know what it means? Okay, so they provisioned to collect the jail records, which will tell them whether a person was indeed imprisoned later on. Okay. Now with all this, so now they have the profile, they have the compass score, they have the ground truth. Now they will start their experiments. But before doing that, there is one thing that is left. You have to operationalize the definition of what? Definition of what are we studying? Definition of what? Recidivism, right? You have to have a working definition of what you mean by recidivism, because it's an abstract term. It's an extremely abstract term, ill-defined. So you will have to basically give a formal definition of what you mean by recidivism. Okay, so the authors defined recidivism as follows. This would mean a criminal offense that resulted in a jail booking and took place for a crime after the crime for which the defendant was compass scored. See if you are able to swallow the definition and tell me if there is an issue. So basically, this is about a future crime, okay, unrelated to the crime for which the defendant was originally compass scored. Okay, that is what is the authors define as recidivism. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Hmm. Now, there is one more issue. Okay, the issue is that which criminal case should be associated with a particular compass score of a defendant. Okay, so a defendant might have multiple compass scores and the defendant might have multiple criminal cases. Now, how do you associate a particular compass score of a defendant with a particular criminal case? Okay, so this is an important point. And here, as is usual in this kind of data-centric studies, the authors used a heuristic. And their heuristic approach was very simple, that any crime that was committed within 30 days to this compass score would be treated as the crime for which the compass score is taken. So now you have a timeline. Say here the compass score is taken. You look within a 30-day period. And look for any criminal case. If you get one, then you associate it with the compass score. Now, question is, if you don't get one, if you don't get one, then discard that compass score. Okay, if you don't get one, then you discard that compass score. Fine. Now, the ground truth part about the jail records. So how long will you see? So after the compass score has been taken, how long will you go? What should be the period up to which you would look for a new crime for that person? Okay, because you have to look for a new crime for that person after the crime for which he or she was compass scored. So there has to be again a time limit. So the authors used a 2-year window to check for the next crime. Okay, so this is based on this 2-year choice, is again a heuristic choice, but this is again according to North Point's guidelines. So if within 2 years no crime has been done, then the next crime that is done is thought to be a completely new crime. Okay. So that is what the whole setup is like. Okay. Now there is one thing that I have not told you so far. So how does North Point get its data? Now this is done by asking the defendants to fill up something called a compass questionnaire. Okay, during the their trial. And this data is fed into the software, and the software keeps on improving or fine tuning its predictions based on more and more data from the defendants filled up through their compass questionnaires. So this is how the compass software or the North Point software gets its data. But the authors did not have this type of data because they cannot get this data because this is actually accessed only by North Point. Okay, so they had to somehow identify an alternative source of data, and that's why they got the criminal records to build the profile of the defendants. You see, this is also a profile of the defendants that the North Point company is building. Okay, in the Compass software, the North Point company is building a profile based on this Compass questionnaire. Okay, but the authors did not have access to this, so they had to resort to some public resources, like as I said, the criminal records, in order to build the profile that they wanted to do. So now, one more thing about violent risk of recidivism. Now, what do you mean by violent, and how do you separate it from the normal risk of recidivism? One is the simple risk of recidivism, and the other is the violent one. So what do you mean by the violent one? So the violent one comprises the following: murder, manslaughter, rape, robbery, and extreme assault. Okay, so these are part of violent risk of recidivism, and these were taken based on the FBI guidelines. Now, with all this, the authors are set to do their study. Okay, and in tomorrow's class, we will look into some of the very interesting studies that the authors carried on in order to show that there exists a blatant discrimination between different races, okay, especially a pair of races. So we will mostly talk about a comparison between black and white, which were the two most predominant races in the data set of the authors. So this is like something that we will try to compare. So we will compare the compass scores against these two races. Okay. We will also see against but I would say that the highlight of the study was this one. Okay, so we'll stop here. If you have any questions, you can ask.
I just have one question, sir.
Yes,
So,
sure.
is it true that only the data will cause the bias, or there might be some other attributes as well? Let's say there is no bias at all in the data set. Can that framework or the model be
Of
impacted by
course,
the bias?
the model itself can also be biased. It is
Okay.
possible that the model is biased without any bias in the data.
Okay.
We will see examples like that. Any other questions? Okay, if not, we will stop here and tomorrow we will start from the analysis of the data set and the observations that the authors have made.